here we are. We're live.
Hello, everybody. We are now live, and we are welcoming Tyler, really, as he just closing the door behind himself. So, Tyler, welcome. Tyler is a serial entrepreneur, and he is a founder of a company called Lingo Live, and very interesting. Tyler actually lived through starting and scaling and even an exit, which is super special for us because this is our first interview with the founder who actually completed an exit. So exciting. And then Tyler has another venture in mind. So he's a busy entrepreneur. So thank you for joining us. And Tyler, what's on your mind?
Thank you, Elena. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, what's on my mind is AI agents, which I think is on a lot of people's mind right now. And a lot of people call them different things. And the reason it's on my mind, though, is this is a new venture that I just launched with my co-founder, Shanif. And the company's called Locusive. And essentially what we do is replace a lot of the tedious product-related work that customer success and customer support people do in your SaaS product and create a 10 times better experience for your customers. So that's it at a high level. That's definitely top of mind.
Okay, so my first question, I don't know if this should be the first question, but my first question for you, because, as I mentioned before we jumped on, Jeff and I are working on a company to help people with branding and marketing and business development. And one of the things we keep finding is that every time we tell somebody this is what we're doing, somebody's like, oh yeah, my intern is already doing that, or whatever, like we already know how to do that, or whatever. And there's just the speed factor right now that is incredible about how fast things are going in the world because of everybody starting to understand what ChatGPT can do and other LLMs. How are you handling, or how are you thinking about that problem? And is it a real problem, or is it just a perception?
No, it's definitely a real. So the problem being like the speed at which the technology is evolving and how
and that people are being able to use it. How fast they're like adopting the next thing that they can do.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And that's like, if we really want to talk about top of mind, it's that, Eric, is like, okay, you've got an idea here, but this technology is moving so quickly. Like, how do you know that it's not going to become obsolete in a month or in a week, or, when ChatGPT rolls out some new version of this? Definitely top of mind for us. I think for us, we're not trying to get really good at artificial intelligence. We know these models are going to go to 100% accuracy and 0% latency. They're just going to get so good that trying to optimize or build any of that just doesn't make sense for us. So what we're more focusing on is working with businesses to integrate that incredible technology into their enterprise. And that is a hard problem to solve. You can't just connect ChatGPT into your database, let's say, with all your product metrics and just start asking it questions. Fortunately for us, but unfortunately for the world, I guess, it's not that simple. You have to get really good at building data pipelines that can ingest the right data, refresh it the right way. You have to be good at knowing which models to use for which tasks. And then you've got to build the customer-facing experience, in our case, for like how they would actually interact with the AI. So that's where we're focusing on, is more that application layer on top of the AI infrastructure. But who knows, Eric, like you said, like in a month, we may find that like, oh no, actually they've released a ability.
One of the reasons I ask is because Jeff and I were chatting with somebody recently, and they were like, oh yeah, 6 months ago, people are like, yeah, we need that product. We've never seen anything like that. And now they keep going into the, similar companies or whatever, and those people are like, oh yeah, we're already trying out this other one. Like in 6 months they've gone from being cutting edge to behind the 8 ball, and it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, I think I'm a glutton for punishment trying to start startups, and especially an AI startup, because in any startup, like, your success is determined by how quickly you learn and iterate and pivot. And with AI, it's like 10x.
You're going to be iterating all day long.
I know.
And let me ask you about your startup history. I know that your prior startup had really nothing to do with AI, really. But on the other hand, it was way ahead of its time because it was about, as far as, if I understand it correctly, remote language learning way before the world embraced remote, right? Because when COVID hit, everybody became remote. You became remote way before that. So maybe you were ahead of the curve here too, hopefully. So talk to us about what it's like to be a trailblazer and ahead of the curve and convince the world that they should be doing something they are not doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, so Lingo Live, my former company, the concept was simple. Like you said, Elena, it was about connecting over video conference with a native language tutor who could teach you from the comfort of your home, which today is a pretty sensible thing. But in 2010, when I first started doing this, like the story is I started this as a hobby. I learned Spanish with a woman in Guatemala over Skype. Like, and I thought this was weird in 2009 when I started doing it. But I just thought it was a hobby. It was a thing I was doing for fun. I would, 8 o'clock at night after I get home from work and have dinner, I would open up my Skype and, connect with this woman. And I just thought it was really fun, really convenient, really affordable. But after about a year of it, I became fluent. And that was when the light bulb happened of like, oh, this could work. This could actually be a business. But to your point, like a lot of the early people I told about it were like, that's kind of weird. Like you're just talking to another human over the computer. Like, I don't know that I would feel
is so not weird today was super weird.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's very true. And it changed so quickly.
Yeah.
So quickly.
So my co-founder and I have this discussion all the time, which is like, it's a really hard balance when you're building a company to strike between, on the one hand, getting customer feedback and hearing what customers want, and on the other hand, having like a strong product conviction that like this seems weird, but this is where we're going. And I think that we're going to get past whatever weirdness you're feeling about this, which is not because it's not sensible. It's because you're not used to it. So we have this conversation all the time. Like you can get in trouble if you over-index on either of those. If you just build what every single thing that customers ask for, well, you haven't really created anything that innovative. Like someone else is going to create that too. You're not really being that innovative. You're literally just taking instructions from customers. But on the other hand, if you just sit in a closet and you don't talk to any customers and you just build what's in your head because you think you're a genius, you're going to fail as well. So you got to kind of strike that balance. And I actually like when I hear feedback from someone that's like, I don't know, that's kind of weird. I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. Tell me more about that. Why do you think that's weird? Yeah.
So you were doing it way early when it was weird and you were trying to change people's behavior. And I'm sure that was kind of difficult. And then COVID hit and all of a sudden, everybody did it. How did that impact your business?
Well, in two ways. One was, it impacted us in a positive way because all of a sudden we had a lot of customers, prospects coming to us saying, hey, we want to sign up. So it was the biggest period of revenue growth in the company's history. Actually, that's not true. Second largest period of revenue growth in the company's history was 2020 through 2021. So that was one way, which was obviously great. But the other way was we had actually moved to an all remote company in 2019. And so that's actually the thing I remember the most is like March of 2020, April of 2020. It was just another day at the office for us at Lingo Live. Like all of our processes, all of our systems were remote first. We weren't like, the only difference was those of us who had kids that were home from school, like stuff like today and that I'm dealing with y'all, like, hey, a little bit weird. I got a kid in the other room, but outside of that, it was another day at the office versus we saw others who hadn't been remote or had a hybrid work structure really struggling and really scrambling to find things. So it was a positive for us on both fronts.
So switching directions a little bit, and we talked about a little bit about this before we jumped on live here, was the VC journey. So you said you were VC backed.
Mm-hmm.
Were the VCs already involved as when COVID hit, or was that after? Was it because of COVID that you were able to be like, hey, look, we were geniuses. We knew this way before everybody. No.
No. Yeah. We we raised our Series A in 2017, so long before COVID.
Mhm.
And then we did like an A1 round in 2018, 19, can't remember. So no, it wasn't COVID induced. But we had a lot of failures. We had a lot of challenges over the course of the kind of 10 years of me building the business. So while COVID was great to us, like a lot of the time period between our Series A and COVID was not, because we had some false signals that we were able to close some large customers and grow quickly. And then we believed that those customers were just the tip of the iceberg and that we were going to be able to get more and more of the same types of, 6-figure and 7-figure customers. And what we found is that, like, yeah, you can get more of them, but there's not many more of them out there. Like, it's actually most of the iceberg. And so we raised, we didn't raise too much money, but we staffed up too much, expecting us to grow like a rocket ship. And we didn't really do that. And part of that was just the market we were focused on with language learning. That's a huge battle scar that I have from a decade of trying to build a language learning business. Is unfortunately in the United States, not many people willing to spend the time or money to learn a foreign language versus, if we had started the company in a different market, it might have been a different story. So that's why Preply, who was the company that we sold Lingo Live to, that's why they were such a good home for us, is because they had built a very similar business, but in the European market where they did grow like, skyrocket. And they came to us because they were trying to grow their US presence and their B2B business, which is what we focused on. So it was a good match for both sides.
Nice. So looking back now, you're starting a new business. You're looking back of what you learned from your prior business. What were like the three, and I know it's a cliche question, so sorry about that, but nonetheless, what were like the three biggest ahas that you would say to somebody who's starting a business? You should know this, this, and that.
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things I did when right after I sold the business, excuse me, was I had like a whiteboard in my office, and I tried to zoom out and like map out over a 10-year journey, because we did a series of pivots. I tried to kind of zoom out for the first time and think about what were all these pivots, why did I do this, and if I'm going to start a new business, like, what do I need to do differently? So one thing that was coming to mind, Elena, when you said that, was we were always a vitamin, not a pain pill. What we were selling at the end of the day was very much a nice to have to the buyer, not to the user. So our business was, we would provide online, primarily English communication coaching to software engineers, data scientists, and tech professionals who were English as a second language. That was our focus. For the actual professionals who were learning with us, this was a must-have. They loved it. But for the buyer, which was the HR leader, this was not what kept them up at night. This wasn't like a top priority. It was thinking about, how do I equip my English as a second language employees with the skills they need to communicate more effectively here. Doesn't mean they didn't care about it. They did, but it's not what they're getting pressured from the CEO, CFO to deliver on, right? It's one of many things, and it doesn't even crack the top 10. So that was one of the biggest takeaways, is like, make sure it doesn't, to me, it depends on what kind of business you want to build. Like, but I don't think the size of the market is that important. What is more important is the buyer in that market. Is this a pain pill, or is this a vitamin? Is this a must-have, or is this a nice-to-have? That was
Is there a way
one
to
big thing.
is there a way to kind of change the dynamic of that? In other words, can you convince people they have a pain point where they think they need a vitamin, but they actually need a pain pill? Or do they, yeah, is that something you can do? Or do you think that's kind of like,
To an extent, but that's actually a great point, Eric. Like, that was a blessing in disguise of building a business in a market where there wasn't tremendous demand or pain to solve this. Like, the huge blessing in disguise there was that you had to get really good at marketing and at storytelling and unpacking why this challenge should matter more to you than maybe you think it does. So that was a huge asset over the years, as we had to get really, really good at telling the story of how this is a pain pill. But Did it ever crack the top 5 priorities for our customers? No. I think like at the end of the day, startups scale primarily because of you have a problem that you're solving that is deeply meaningful to this customer, and you're solving it in a way better way. And then the other thing that came to mind, Elena, to answer your question on that, is the team, the people. I think if you have like product market fit and the ability to scale is like, you have identified a problem that matters deeply to a customer that's willing to pay for it. You've built a solution that does that really well, better than anybody else. And you have a great, great team that is not just really talented, but has the right attitude and mentality. And so that would be the other thing I would tell entrepreneurs, and something that's top of mind for me is sometimes you over-index, especially at an early stage, you over-index on like hard skills instead of soft skills. So I am much more focused on the attitude and the mentality of the person than the kind of resume that they have. It doesn't mean that the resume doesn't matter. Of course it does, but you can get enamored with the resume and not pay attention to some of the red flags about kind of how this person operates or what they need to be successful at a startup that would make you realize like they're just not a good fit for the stage that we're at.
Oh, yeah, I would definitely agree with you, especially when you're talking about a team of 5, 10, 20, right? Yeah. You have to get along with everybody. You have to want to solve problems all together. And to some degree, you can never be above anything, right? Yeah. Because everybody is dealing with crisis probably, every 20 minutes. Yeah. But it's very interesting.
Totally. Yeah.
So you talked a bit about marketing and how you had to market in maybe not a fully traditional way, because you're trying to push these people to understand their own pain point. But how did you market? Like, it is a B2B question. Like, what channels were you using? Were you doing like one-to-many billboard type marketing, or how are you doing that?
Yeah. No, definitely not one-to-many. I mean, a lot of reasons why there's like brand marketing, and then there's, I guess, demand gen or lead gen marketing. We did not do brand marketing, I guess, for 2 reasons. Brand marketing being like a billboard or something where it's not like, directly driving leads for your business, right? 2 reasons why we didn't do that. Number one was because of the pain point we were solving was so niche, it just didn't make sense. The one-to-many didn't make sense. You had to kind of take more of a spearfishing approach and identify exactly the right customer profile for you and a targeted, account-based marketing plan for that customer. But the other reason is we just couldn't afford it, right? Like brand marketing, there's a reason that companies that are doing brand marketing is like Coca-Cola, Facebook, et cetera. Right. Like it takes a not only resources and a budget, but like the ability to be patient and knowing that if you do it well, the customers will come eventually. We did not have that luxury. We needed to get customers every single week, every single month. And so we did a lot more demand gen and scrappy demand gen. So one thing that's worked really well for us, and I'm definitely going to do again with Locusive, is partnerships where you kind of do co-marketing. So you find another company that's maybe at a similar stage, but isn't competitive to you. So like there's a company called Life Labs Learning, which is based in New York. They're a great company. They do manager training, and they do it in a group format. Like that's very different from what we did at Lingo Live, but their buyer was the exact same person. And so we did a webinar about, the benefits of training your employees. I can't remember exactly right, but it was like ultimately the same problem we were both solving. We were just solving it for different types of employees in the organization. And you do that, you're able to kind of combine forces as a company. You get broader reach, you get more leads out of it. So that worked really well for us. Or, going to a conference where we knew customers were going to be hanging out, but we couldn't afford a booth. And we would just do some guerrilla marketing to try and get in front of them or get people's attention, which that also works really well. But you got to be pretty shameless to do that too. You got to be comfortable being like pretty shameless and embarrassing.
And another interesting thing is that as a small startup, you in essence were growing the category, right? Because you were trying to change behaviors and make these HR leaders understand that, teaching their workforce language matters a heck of a lot more than, they were thinking before that, right?
Right.
And that takes time, money, guts, effort, because not only you doing it on behalf of your own business, but doing it on behalf of the category, which usually small businesses don't do.
Right.
Usually that is literally like, a big giant company. But I guess in that space, there were not that many big giant companies. So you took the honors.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's hard. It's a lot of hard work. And I think that going back to the team, you need people that are that know what they're stepping into, that like, hey, we're going to fail 100 times before we're successful here. And if I'm experiencing in my first 3 months of work here, feeling of underachievement, like that's actually okay. That's part of the journey. And you need people, more importantly, that are really passionate about the problem. So the people that did really well at Lingo Live and stayed with us the longest were people where the mission of the company was just deeply meaningful to them. It held a lot of purpose in their lives to empower these English as a second language employees. So some of them were former ESL tutors. We had probably like 1 out of 10 employees was like a former teacher who had taught ESL learners. And so that matters a lot too. You got to make sure the folks coming on board don't just have the hard skills and the soft skills, but like they are deeply motivated to get out of bed every day to solve this problem.
All right, so I'm gonna shift gears 180 degrees from that to ChatGPT as forewarned. And so Jeff usually does this, so I don't know if we're going to do it the way that he does it, but we're just going to move forward anyway. I put in the question of 10 funny questions to ask a podcast guest who's a founder of a language learning focused company. I didn't put that you have exited, but anyway, it came up with a bunch of goofy questions. And Jeff always asks this question: do you want absurd first or thought-provoking first? So I don't know, which one would you?
I like absurd. Let's go absurd.
Okay, let's try absurd. Okay. All right, I'm just going to go with the first one here because it's a little bit absurd. If your company, actually both of your companies, were a language, each one obviously different, which language would it be and why?
Oh, wow. My companies were a language. Yeah. Well, I can answer Lingo Live. Like Locusive is so new. So I would say like, what's the newest language? Like Klingon maybe is like probably the most recent language ever invented.
Yep. Okay.
Or maybe like JavaScript or something. I don't know. Lingo Live, I'd say Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese. So I used to be fluent in Portuguese, but I love speaking Brazilian Portuguese because it has this like rhythm to it that is very much about having fun. It's hard to put it. There's like almost an amusing tone to Brazilian Portuguese, and everything's like relax, don't take things too seriously. So we had this core value: no one is going to die. And it was about like, look, guys, we take our work really seriously here, but we're not curing cancer. We're not doing brain surgery. Like no one's going to die. So let's enjoy the ride and make sure that we take care of ourselves and not just, burn ourselves out over committing to this thing, which was obviously a very unique core value to have, especially as a tech startup. But I think it's kind of hard to explain it to people that weren't in the company, but those that were understand, like there is a vibe that was very much, serious, hardworking, but also fun-loving. And there's something about Brazilian Portuguese that has that same rhythm, has that same accent. So that's what's coming to mind for me.
So
this probably is the best answer to stupid ChatGPT question that we've ever heard, right, Eric?
Yeah, that was a fantastic. Yes. So by the way, one of the questions that's on here, which I won't have you go into, but you've kind of already answered it. Like, what's your favorite made-up language from a movie or TV show? And have you tried learning it? We'll go with Klingon as the answer for that one. I don't know if you've tried learning it, but
I have not.
Okay, probably for the best. You probably have other things as an serial entrepreneur to do. I have to say, I don't know how Jeff does this because these are not very thought-provoking, these questions. So I'm going to give one that's maybe a little bit. thought-provoking, but what's more difficult, learning or a new language or trying to explain, and we'll go with locusive, or trying to explain your startup to your grandparents or grandparent-aged people?
That's a good, depends on the startup. With Lingo Live, it's very easy to explain to my grandparents, and
That's
they
awesome.
knew.
Locusive is, I think, the more interesting one for that.
Yeah, with locusive, I don't know. I would definitely, my answer is learning a language. Learning a language is hard. You got to really enjoy it. And that's actually one of the reasons why we did it the way we did it at Lingo Live, and why I was so motivated to start the company was, I mentioned before, like, I had a lot of fun learning Spanish with this woman in Guatemala. And it was because she's a human being. She's not like a Rosetta Stone course, that you're just like compliantly going through the modules. Like, this is a human that you're having a conversation with, and you're laughing and, getting to know her kids and stuff who come barging into the room. Like, it was fun. It was a human connection, but it's a lot of work. So you got to really enjoy it. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of like comfort with being embarrassed and saying stupid things. And, versus on the startup side with locusive, like, if I were to explain it to my grandparents, I would say with any business, like, if you can't explain it in a way where a third grader or a grandparent, call in the most basic layman's terms that someone could understand and see value in, then you might not, I would argue, you might not understand the root cause of the problem that you're solving and why it matters. So yeah, I think learning a language would be harder, but it's pretty close.
That's fantastic.
So I have a question, Tyler, regarding your new venture. What are you finding the most challenging right now?
Oh man, the world of AI, it's just the most, it's the most exciting technological innovation of my career, but it's, as a result, it's so mind-numbingly confusing because there's a million startups out there that are doing different things with this technology. And so finding a way to really hone in on what are you focusing on and why does that thing matter and why are you doing it differently from these other companies is one piece of that chaos. And then the other piece is, we talked about this before, Eric, like the technology is evolving so quickly that like you actually need to update that answer to what I just said, like every week or every month, because there's just new, innovation in how autonomous agents work or models, and chain of reasoning models have come out now. Like, does that threaten your business? So in a way, it feels like the building a startup in the web 2.0 world was like, it was like being in like a high school fencing match. And building a startup now in the AI world is like being being in like the Colosseum in Rome with gladiators and like tigers, and it's just constant, threats and chaos around you.
You haven't said whether you're raising money yet for locusive, but if you are, or if you plan to, how do you deal with this problem, this very problem of like, you can probably talk to a VC on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, they've heard that 5 other companies are doing your product. Like, how do you think about that when you're trying to raise money for a company where you can't even stabilize the market long enough to have a product that's easy to describe?
Yeah, no, I mean, talk about top of mind, Eric. So we are raising money right now. I'm in the midst of a seed round fundraise, and this is, like you say, Tuesday, and then on Thursday, like you're talking about my Tuesday and Thursday this week. Like, I was in New York this week on Tuesday making pitches, and then Thursday yesterday, like having follow-ups. And it's like the narrative actually kind of changes by the day. But it's not the core of the problem that you're solving. Like, the core of it is being able to interact with software in a 10 times better way, where instead of you having to click around or do mind-numbingly filters and navigate things, like you just ask and you get the answer surfaced to you. It's like the Star Trek computer. We talked about that before, right? You just ask. It's the way that human beings get things done or get answers today in the non-digital world, is you just ask. And taking all the convenience and flexibility and personalization that comes from the software world we've known, and combining it with like the just natural language world that we live in the kind of analog world, is so exciting and is so valuable. But the narrative around, to your point, like what specific problem are you solving within that space and how do you differentiate from competitors is really tough. And I think at the end of the day, like, if you're a VC making a bet on a seed stage company, you're betting on the horses, not the carriage. You're betting on the founders and how well they understand the problem today, but more importantly, that like if they find out they're wrong as they scale, like how effective are they going to be at pivoting and growing this thing as we go here? Because there's very little chance that whatever thing you think it is at your seed round is the thing that, like, when you're ringing the bell at NASDAQ, 10 years later, that is like the same exact thing. Like, you have to pivot, you have to be smart, you have to be nimble, you have to listen to customers. So we're trying to lean more into that because my co-founder and I are both serial entrepreneurs. This is not our first rodeo. He sold one of his businesses to Twitter and did super well there. So we know how to create enterprise value and we know how to create successful businesses. So we're trying to lean more into that than like specifically what's happening in the world of AI in October 2024.
Yeah, and that's going to change. I mean, I suspect the dynamic is going to change at some point. Now, it could be that things just keep going at this pace, but I suspect that things will kind of even out where everybody now that has at least a grip on these are the tools and these are the things you can do. Now, there will be people who can iterate faster on top of those tools in that new world. But I don't
see normal market consolidation on it, right?
Yeah.
So all the plethora of things the way you're saying is going to somehow find its direction as it inevitably does.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Honestly, y'all, like this AI stuff, I have no idea how it's all going to play out. It feels very different and it feels very hard to predict exactly where the puck is going.
Yeah, I think that's true. Well, we have come to the end of the half hour. In fact, we're over the end of the half hour, and we always go around and ask each person to say one thing that they want to leave our audience with. We didn't tell you this before, Tyler, but I always like to make the guest go first. It's sort of a hazing thing. You don't get any time to think about it. So Tyler, what's one thing that you want to leave our audience with?
It's so cheesy. It's the thing that's coming to mind right now is, so my daughter just turned 8 last week. And every year when my kid has a birthday, even like the day of their birth, I'll record like a quick 60-second video for them and I'll just save it in a Dropbox. And I don't know when I'm going to show this to them, but I've done it every year with all my kids. And I did this yesterday for her because I was delayed on it. And it's so cheesy and cliche, but do what you love, I think is the thing that I've learned since selling my company a year ago. It was just over a year ago that I sold my company. After selling it, I wasn't sure I was going to start another thing. I didn't know what I wanted to do, especially because of the gauntlet I'd run through starting and scaling a business. Like, it was really hard. And so I gave myself a good chunk of time after selling the business to really take a break and really be thoughtful about what is it that I want to do. And I entertained a lot of different career paths having nothing to do with a tech startup. But at the same time, I started kind of doing some consulting work for Shanif, my co-founder, trying to help him out. And it was just very simple. I loved it. All the other stuff that I was doing with my time to kind of experiment, like maybe I would be happier doing this, paled in comparison to the work I was doing with him. I would get off a meeting for a different thing and feel just drained and exhausted and jump into a meeting with him. And at the end of the meeting, I was like jumping out of my skin, excited, like heart rate through the roof, just love it, even though it's not a fun thing to spend your time doing. So that's what I said on the video to my daughter. I said, listen, this is cliche. People say it, but when you have it, if you find something that just gives you such great joy as you're doing it, even if it doesn't make sense to you why you enjoy it so much, don't overthink it. Just do that thing because you love it. And it'll make, in order to be successful, you got to work crazy hard. And it's a lot easier to work crazy hard on something that doesn't feel like you're working crazy hard. You're just really enjoying the work. And so that's the thing that I would tell a lot of people that are trying to get into tech startups. I think do it. And I think I did when I first got into it for the wrong reason, which is just like the excitement of,
Mhm.
building the next Facebook or whatever. And so if you're finding as you go that like you aren't loving this, like stop, go do something else, because it's not a normal thing to love. And I just feel really grateful that I found the thing that I love. So I'm trying not to take it for granted.
Fantastic. Elena?
Awesome. Well, before I go into my kind of 2 cents, Tyler, how can we find you?
Oh yeah. So you've got my email right here. So the company is called locusive.com, and my email is just tyler@locusive.com. And I'm happy to chat with anybody about anything. If you just want advice, or if you're interested in what we're doing with Locusive, or you've got advice for me, I'll take it all. So that's how you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So on my end, I really loved kind of 2 points. One, of course, is what you were talking about. The founders should know, right, when they go into this exercise, and what you've kind of learned after many hard years. That's one. And number two, actually, the conversation about the unpredictability of AI, because it is a tool, yet it's a very different tool from everything we knew. So that's kind of like my 2 cents.
Yeah, and Elena, that's definitely one of the things that I take away, is that speed thing. It's just really amazing. Like I do think, to your point, Tyler, I do think things have changed in terms of we've been through these cycles, but never where 6 months is an eternity kind of version. The other thing that I wanted to bring up that really has stuck with me from this last half-hour conversation, it was something you brought up very briefly, which was this co-marketing concept. I think that's a really interesting way that you handled that problem of, you can't go out and just, put Coca-Cola on a billboard and hope that they come and do, Lingo Live. You have to do something a little more clever. And I think that's a really interesting way where you kind of find the right people to bring you to the right people on the other side. That's really interesting. So Tyler, thank you so much. Great chatting with you in this episode, and we look forward to hearing more about your successes. And of course, we're going to be following Locusive to see how startup number 2 goes. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Let's do it again.